Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. Welcome to Hello Ramadan 2023, brought to you by Have Halal Will Travel and The Right Company. I'm Sabrina from Calm Collective and I will be today's host. And the session is called Depressed? Just pray lah. I've certainly heard that before. So thank you for joining us. And as we all know, COVID has disrupted many things in our lives. And so we wanted to launch Hello Ramadan as a way for Muslims to rediscover their faith and the true essence of Ramadan. The Hello Ramadan online platform will run from 17th of March to 27th April, and there will be weekly recipe drops, inspirational Ramadan stories, engaging live shows like ours, lucky draws with attractive prizes, and also a 30-day mindfulness journal. And finally, we'll close the month with an exciting physical event at the Grand Emporium at the Singapore Expo in collaboration with Mak Besar from 14th to 16th April 2023. So that's in a couple of weeks. So special thanks to the brand sponsors, Sadia, as well as Oatbedian for supporting us in this event. So do support us by joining us online or at the physical event or you can also share this event with your loved ones. Okay, so how's everyone? Are we ready?
All good.
Great. So let's get started. We're going to be talking about, obviously, depression. We're going to be talking about mental health. We will be talking about Islam and how all of that works together, whether for us or not so much for us, right? I think a lot of us here who have joined, not sure about you, but maybe we have encountered some kind of like mental health challenge, whether it's something that we've encountered for ourselves, or maybe we're a caregiver to someone who may be struggling, right? I think this is very much a part of life, and oftentimes I think the natural instinct is to turn to what we know best, and for some of us, it's our religion, Islam, or anything else, right? And we always turn to what we know to try to figure out how to navigate the challenges that come our way. So I would like to start by getting everyone to introduce themselves, to share a bit about their background as well as what their relationship with mental health is. So may I invite Ustazah Nadia to start?
Thank you, Sabrina. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hello Ramadan. My name is Nadia Hanim. I am the director of Al-Wafa and also an Ustazah, which is a religious teacher. I currently sit in the High Council of Burgas, which is an association of Islamic scholars in Singapore. And then I am also an associate member with the Fatwa Committee from the Office of Mufti. A brief introduction of myself. That's all it is, Arena. And my relation, is it, to the topic? Yeah, well, I'm, as an Ustazah, I frequently communicate or deal with members of the community from diverse backgrounds. And I have people coming up to me, especially ladies, they share their grievance or their problems, their issues. And as an Ustazah, we are trained to identify severity in issues. So issues, they are also spectrum. And we cannot generalize the issues. We can see that issues may be similar, but not necessarily the same lah. So we have to always explore and observe further. So as an Ustaz, it's easier for me to give advice on issues that are straightforward, but there are things that we are not equipped to pass on the knowledge. Yeah, so I do not have the tools to counsel, for example. So usually we would direct or we would ask people with issues, especially with regards to mental issues or mental health challenges, to go to the correct platforms.
Great. So what I'm hearing is that you're obviously a trusted person within your circles. I mean, the network's very big, so you receive a lot of people's grievances, and it's your responsibility, I guess, to show them a direction to ask for help if necessary, or maybe to help them yourself as and where you can.
Yeah, we are trying our best, Sabrina.
Yeah, I totally understand. So thank you. Now let's go over to Afika. Can you share about yourself and what your relationship with mental health is?
Hi, I'm a participant of Club Shield since 2019. And because of my relapse, I had to go back again last year. So what is my relationship with mental health? I think for all these years of trying to manage it, right, it has been very tough for me to go through it on my own because others out there are not in my shoes, so it's very hard for them to understand. And so it's a very close topic for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally feel you. I've been there before as well. So Afika, I'm looking forward to hearing your personal experiences with mental health and how you've navigated this as a, I guess, Muslimah as well, right? Thank you. Okay, and over to you, Harun. Why don't you share more about yourself and your relationship with mental health?
Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Said Harun. I'm a consultant psychiatrist with Alami Clinic at present. I guess my own exposure to mental health is really part of my own professional expertise as a psychiatrist. There are not very many of us in the community. There's only two Muslim psychiatrists in the country. And yeah, I think in as much as I hope to share my own professional expertise, I also look forward to every sharing that I give because it's also an opportunity for me to learn from the experiences of others, whether it be patients, caregivers, or others around who care about people with mental health issues. And I also see it as a learning experience as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, wow, we're okay. We're really lucky. There's only there's only two of you, and we've got you here right now with us. So.
I hope more people actually join in and consider it as a career, whether it be psychologists, psychiatrists, because the need is immense.
The need is immense, and I think it's really important that when we're looking for mental health professionals to turn to work with, we want people who can also understand our context better, right? That's always very important because at the end of the day, what we experience is we want to look for the empathy behind it and the understanding. Okay, wow. So we've got a great panel today, and let's just dive into the conversation, right? So the reason for having this talk today is really to understand mental health, stigma, and Islam. So maybe what we can start with is really, let's just tackle the topic at hand. This depressed, just pray lah. Is that enough? What are your thoughts? Maybe I'll start with Afika. Have you heard this before? And what are your thoughts on this?
I feel like I've heard this before in the past, and that even in my family, there's still stigma against mental health. What I feel is that for my family, one of my family members, he told me that Quran is the answer to everything, that I should read the Quran more often and such. But when I tried, I couldn't feel anything because I was very numb inside me. I was very numb. And I have difficulty even praying also, and difficulty to really internalize the Quran because when we recite it, you have to read the meaning, right? So it was very difficult for me. And even though I stopped praying for a while, I come back to it after I get better. So it's a good for me, it's a good learning journey for me that God is not harsh. It's not meant to it's not meant to punish us. God also wants us to be able to take care of ourselves. So there's some perception that mental health, having a mental condition is a punishment, but it's not. It's actually a trial for you to go through so that you'll be able to be very close to God. And that's what I feel also, like after every step that I took to be kind to myself, I always go back to God first before anything else. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And I think a couple of things that I heard from your sharing is that, when you're depressed, you have this numbness that you feel. And it's, I guess in that state, it's hard for you to process anything, let alone the Quran, right? There's so much to understand and to maybe translate if you need to. So I understand that. And the other part that you brought up was also like how Islam and how your relationship with God has also helped you make sense of things as a trial, as well as I guess as also a place of solace when you're feeling better and to find comfort in it, right? I'd love to hear from you, Nadia, what your thoughts are on this idea of depressed, just go pray lah.
Let's go pray lah. Well, first and foremost, I would like to say that prayer, salat, it does help because we know of a verse in Quran which mentioned wasta'inu bis-sabri was-salah, seek help from Allah by doing a prayer and by having patience. But I need everyone to understand that praying is one of the approaches or the solutions. It's not exclusive. It's not that you have to exclusively pray, then immediately you'll find solutions to your problems. You have to understand that at times, like just now, Afika was telling us that people ask her to pray, people ask her to read the Quran, but she felt numb. So there are phases, or we call it their levels. When you're at this level, the numbness level, and then praying is this level, you have to understand that at times we need some navigation through our emotions. We need to navigate our emotions or our problems to get to that praying. So we have people coming to us telling that, Ustazah, I am so depressed. I spend my time sleeping. I cannot even move. I can't even go to the toilet to take wudu or pray. So from not able to move to taking the ablution, there's a gap there. So we have to address that part. So that's the reason why, yes, praying can help, but you have to understand there are other approaches for you to get from that feeling of numbness or depression to praying as well as reading the Quran. So there are phases, there are stages. So you have to understand that. And if you ask me, does prayer help? It does help because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had taught us. But in other verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had obligated us to seek knowledge as well. So you have to seek knowledge and have to put in the effort on how can I navigate my emotions, for how can I get rid of feeling depressed or feeling numb. So that part, that knowledge part, you have to seek. Where can I get help when it comes to this until, I can move myself towards praying, towards taking the ablution, towards reciting the Quran, and definitely you will find peace there, inshallah.
I know. I really appreciate how you have that kind of a bit of a framework to this, actually. So I think what we're agreeing on here is that prayer definitely helps. However, there are certain factors that need to help us get to a state where we can be present with God, with a prayer, right?
Yes.
And maybe I think at this point we should probably turn to Dr. Harun, and maybe the question would be, how do you, in your own personal practice as a practicing Muslim as well as a doctor, how do you make sense of mental health and also mental health and Islam? How do you make sense of that?
Well, I mean, at a personal level, I think there's a fair bit of congruence, and how I tend to share with my patients in terms of where's the starting point when it comes to dealing with mental health. It's actually quite important to see it in parallel with, say, physical health issues as well. So, for example, if someone has a broken leg or their arm is in a cast, there are provisions within our culture to be able to, or our traditions, to be able to accede to that concern, that ailment, and understand that there are limitations towards being able to fulfill certain obligations at certain periods of time. And the same can be said with mental health, right? So in mental health, there are concerns with regards to a person's level of concentration, a person's ability to be able to fulfill certain abilities, and so on and so forth. And if you take it as an illness category, then for sure, there are some provisions within the traditions and the religious rulings to be able to afford you that flexibility during that period of time while you seek help. So in that sense, there's a fair bit of congruence if only we make the right comparisons and understand the issues specifically.
Yeah, so I mean, in Islam, definitely there are provisions when it comes to one's physical health. And I think what I'm getting from you is that if we can see mental health conditions, although we can't see them, if we can regard them as an actual illness that takes place on a, say, a biological level, right?
Yes.
Then that will actually enable us to accept that this is something that we need to address. And it will also give us some room to I guess, pardon ourselves when we are not in the best state to practice our traditions and practices in a way that we would like to.
If I may, as mentioned by Afika as well, about concentration, that's one. Sleep patterns can change, eating patterns can change. And for some of the more severe mental illnesses, your ability to focus away from some of the symptoms can also be very, very difficult. And therefore that makes specifically, say, prayer very challenging to be able to focus and khushu, for example. Yet another mental illness we can talk about is obsessive compulsive disorder. And when we think about wudu, taking ablution in someone who has OCD, and then for sure it's very challenging for them to be able to maintain that just 3 times and stop there. And in that sense, there are many parallels because mental illness essentially presents to us along the lines of our own cultures and our own religions and our own day-to-day experiences. So it's really just a bit more understanding, and I think over time we'll be able to do better.
No, thanks for sharing that. And I think that idea of OCD and wudu I can only imagine it can be quite challenging for someone going through that, right? Okay. So I would love to maybe unpack a bit more around mental health, just to understand what that actually looks like in a practical level, right? So I'd love to hear from Afika, what was your experience of your mental health challenge? Could you share more about that? How did you know that you were struggling with something? I think you have to unmute yourself, sorry.
Oh, sorry. So for my journey itself, it started in 2014 in school. I was in university, and I had trouble staying on with friends. I think I get very scared to see them, and I was very paranoid to meet other people. I think it's because what happened previously in my polytechnic years. I think I with someone and I couldn't fool myself. So I think that small seed, right, actually flourished into a bigger tree. Meaning that because I did not seek help early, I delayed until 2018. It actually got worse from my journey. I think from 2014 onwards, I started to hear voices. I started to believe that someone is following wherever I go. And I was so depressed, and that in 2018 I was awarded in NUH because of my symptoms. It was actually a regular appointment. So they admitted me in the hospital for about 1 month. However, they could not decipher what I was going through because I was trying to fake that I am well. Yeah, so that is really not good because you need to really tell a doctor what really happened to you, be honest and everything. But I fake it because I thought that if I don't get out of the ward, I would be blacklisted from being employed. So when I was discharged, I'm supposed to actually go for a referral at IMH, but I did not follow up. So I was just trying to manage by working, and it wasn't that good for me because even when I was working, I couldn't focus, I couldn't concentrate. I had a hard time to be myself. I was very afraid of people. So I resigned once and tried to find a job. So when I was at that place of struggle, my counselor told me that, whether I want to be in a rehabilitation program at Club Hill. In other words, recovery awareness program. So I did went to the rehab, and to cut the story short, I had a relapse in 2020 because I stopped my medication. And clearly I wasn't aware that it was wrong because I felt like I wasn't aware of what I'm doing. So when I see the doctor they told me that I had to be warded again because of my dangerous high moods and low moods. So it actually elevated to a higher degree. So when I have high mood, right, I will change character. I'll be a dictator, I'll be a wali, and I'll be a child. So there are 3 different characters that I play on a daily basis without my medication. Yeah, so now alhamdulillah it's better. I am at my baseline behavior. So I'm very happy that the psychiatrist did not give up on me. And I was very thankful that my parents did give up on me because my parents are my closest, connection to. And even though they also don't have that much knowledge, but they try their best to help me any way I can. Like because I'm not working for a few years, they help me to finance me. And until today, I'm very grateful for that. Yeah, so after I took my medication, everything went well. After a few months, it took me a lot of months to get better. So during that time, I was struggling in my life, and also having suicidal thoughts is no joke. I really felt it, and I had to hide in a blanket, like cover myself in a blanket, right, just to help me feel safe. Because I know I'm not gonna do the attempt. For me, through my faith is not right. It's like you're giving up on God, First, life is very precious, life is sacred. And Islam is all about preservation of mind and body. And so I thank God for the continuous support, and until now I feel better, and alhamdulillah I can pray again and read Quran again. Yeah, so that's my journey so far.
Thank you for sharing so vulnerably and honestly. I think it takes a lot of courage to share about your journey, and I really appreciate that you've told us or taken us through like all the different ways that you've managed to seek help, right? So what I got from your story is that the medication did help, and perhaps that brought to awareness that what you're dealing with was something that was medical in nature, like what Dr. Harun mentioned. But at the same time, you still found that comfort in your faith when you were able to find your way to stability. So I just want to build upon what you've shared, Afika. And my question now is actually for Ustazah Nadia. And the question here is really around, I guess, depression and how Islam views depression or even suicidal thoughts, right? Like it can feel very wrong to feel that way, like, Satan did something or something, right? I hear that a lot. So what's your take on that? And how do you help people navigate this?
Yeah, right, Sabrina. This is very important for us to address. Afika, thank you so much for sharing. You are indeed very courageous. I hope that you are in a better place now. Alhamdulillah. Okay. In Islamic perspective, right, from what I've learned, mental well-being in Islamic perspective, there are 2 categories. In fact, there are 3 categories, but I will just bring forward 2 categories. The first category is what we call as the overwhelming emotions towards certain situations or life experiences. And I believe that everyone has experienced this part because, as we know, life is not smooth sailing. And in Islam, we also learn that life on earth, we go through tests. We are always tested. We are always tested in many forms. And this part, the overwhelming emotions, this is where we have to start to intervene. There must be an intervention there. If not, it can get into the second category. So the first category is when you're having overwhelming emotions, and it can happen to just about anyone. It has got nothing to do with weak faith or weak iman or possessed by ghosts or evil spirit. Okay, it's emotions, and emotions are something that is natural. You cannot control. You cannot tell people to cannot feel that, don't feel that. If you feel that, you have weak imans. That is nonsense. Okay, it's natural. Even our prophets, we have verses in the Quran about Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam. He went through sorrow, sadness. The story, we know the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam, the siblings did something bad to him. And then Prophet Yaqub, he was feeling very sorrowful, and he complained to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's a verse, in fact, in the Quran. And we know the stories of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he went through a lot of calamities, a lot of tests by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we talk about problems, when we talk about tests, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu had gone through a lot. I can in fact say that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu had gone through everything. All the problems that we could think of, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu had actually went through that. And that's why the first part is the overwhelming emotions. Everyone, it can happen to everyone. So regardless of what your status is, okay, we go through tests and trials. Now, and then the second category, the overwhelming emotion, the first one, we can, at this stage, we can tell people to, to connect back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to read the Quran, to say this prayer, that prayer. But once you get to the second part, the second category is what we call the mental well-being or mental health that requires a diagnosis from a specialist. It gets, it worsens because from the overwhelming emotions, it wasn't treated, it wasn't intervened. So it becomes something that is medical, it becomes clinical already. So for example, take schizophrenia or maybe OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. We have that, and then extreme depressions with suicidal ideation or thoughts. And this category, we cannot, when you are at this category, you cannot just find any ustaz or ustazah and ask them to, can you help me deal with this situation just by dua? Yes, of course, you can do that concurrently. But at the same time, you have to seek a specialist, someone who can actually help you navigate through your emotions. And if you need to take medication, if you need to follow through designated therapy, please do so that you can continue your life as productive as you can. Right. So in Islamic perspective, we have overwhelming emotions. There's no problem with that. There's no problem with your faith or your iman. But once it deteriorates, for example, until you can hear voices, until you have suicidal thoughts, this is when you cannot just suppress it. You cannot just put it aside and telling yourself that it's okay, I can pray it away. No, you really need someone to help you through those emotions. And I think there are exercises that you have to acknowledge what your issues, what your problems are, so on and so forth. I'm not the expert here, but alhamdulillah, we have Dr. Said Harun. So I think he can explain to us what are the exercises are.
Thank you for sharing, Nadia. And actually, you're right. I would love to hear from Dr. Harun as well. At what point should, I guess, two questions here, right? So at what point should one realize that, okay, I really need to see a specialist now? I need to really look into this from a medical perspective. And when they do come to you, what are some of the concerns that some of your Muslim patients actually bring up when seeing you?
Well, I think as a start state, if people around you, especially those closest to you, take notice that, hey, something's changed about you, there's a palpable shift in terms of how you behave, how you interact with others, your ability to maintain, as what Afika has bravely shared, in terms of your own work or your own relationships with others, and that seems to be on the decline for whatever reason, and people suspect that it's due to your own mental health, then it's actually a good time for you to consider at least seeing a doctor or a specialist, to get a handle on what's going on. And often, if say there is a finding of, say, a mental health issue, there are treatable ways to be able to approach it. What was your second question, Sabrina? Sorry, just to
okay.
clarify.
And so once they actually come see you, what are some of the concerns that people may bring up, especially if they're maybe Muslim patients?
Okay, so in a sense, actually, it can be quite varied. It's actually very, very interesting. The practice of mental health or psychiatry as well is that the lived experience of an individual suffering from a mental illness is very much tied to the individual's background or their own social experience. So for example, even though I may see it as the same entity, for example, say depression or OCD, it may present across different communities or my patients from different communities differently. While we look at hand washing, as I mentioned earlier, usually the main complaint is some people will say, hey, you know, my wudu is being affected, or my ability to do certain things is being affected in a religious setting. But actually what we're seeing is the manifestation of a mental health issue in their day-to-day practices or behavior. So it can come in the shape and form of even your relationship with your spouse, your interests with regards to your own hobbies, above and beyond your own day-to-day religious obligation. So it comes in that shape, it comes in that form, but underpinning that is, at least that's my role as a psychiatrist, is to be able to see, notwithstanding the person's social background, does it fit into the psychopathology or what we see as a mental disorder? And we try to help from there. As mentioned by Ustazah, in prayer as well as religious practices do help. It gives you a sense of solace, something for you to hang on to when you're in a time of distress. But certainly alongside that, some of the medications may be helpful, and that really depends on the symptoms that present to me. Hope that helps answer some of the questions.
No, for sure. I think what I'm getting is that, you know, there's a place for medication, there's a place for prayer. So how do we figure out that, you know, how do we balance both of that out? So I think now we've kind of established that medication can help, and it doesn't hurt to go see a specialist to get checked out, especially when one is facing overwhelming emotions that you cannot manage, right? As Ustazah pointed out. So I'd love to just dig in more about dua, about prayer and Islam now, right? So I think, you know, given that so many of us have heard that, you should just go and pray, or maybe we're also, you know, not guilty, but we also say that to our friends and family as well. Like, have you been praying? You know, I tell my mom sometimes also. So I think there is some grain of truth that prayer can help with our emotions. It can help with our mental well-being, right? So let's try to understand it a bit more. And maybe, Ustazah Nadia, would you like to share more about how Islam helps with our mental well-being? I understand that prayer could be a form of meditation. What are your thoughts on that?
Inshallah. Okay, Sabrina. So I would like to share with everyone a verse from Quran. This is the divine saying from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُو رَبِّهِمْ وَأَنَّهُمْ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. So the translation is, and seek Allah, beg Allah, resort to pray, to patience and prayer for help. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said this in the Quran, resort to patience and prayer for help. So it's not my word, it's not any other scholar's word, but it's the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not just stop there. He continued with, وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ. Truly, prayer is burdensome. It's not, actually praying is not easy. You have to have the willpower to do so. You have to push yourself. Something that is good, you have to, you know, put an effort into doing it until you get used to it. So, and Allah did mention that, yes, praying and being patient, in Allah's words, being patient and praying is not easy. وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ. Allah mentioned it is not easy. That's why when people say that if we get advice from people, oh, just be patient lah, sabar lah, at times you get so annoyed, right? Because you don't go through what I'm going through, and then it's easy for you to say, oh, be patient lah. Who are you to tell me to be patient? You don't know what I'm going through. Because it's difficult. To be patient is difficult. And Allah mentioned that it is difficult to pray and to salat. But Allah also mentioned, illa alal khashin, only those who put their mind to it. Those who put their mind to it. Now, illa alal khashin. So those, if we put our mind to it, and then Allah continued again. How do you put your mind to it? And Allah mentioned the way for you to put your mind into salat and being patient is by realizing that at the end of the day, we shall meet our Lord and we shall be destined to return to Him. So we know that this life on earth is temporary. And at the end of the day, we will find glad tidings if we put our mind to it. And in this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He mentioned this, we know that, oh, okay, it's not just any ustad or ustazah saying, but Allah said, try praying. And by praying is, when the scholars mention, praying is meditation, because when you really put your mind into it, you will regulate your breathing. Breathing always helps. So when you're having like, when you're being very emotional, or in fact, when you're angry, when you're feeling a lot of emotions, people usually ask you to, okay, breathe in, breathe out. It really helps. So when you pray, you regulate your breathing, and then you put your mind into it, and you imagine that you are praying, that you are having conversation and connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a saying by scholars, what they say is this, is beautiful. They say that إِذَا أَرَادَ أَن تُكَلِّمَ اللَّهِ فَعَلَيْهِ بِالصَّلَاةِ وَإِذَا أَرَادَ أَن يُكَلِّمْهُ اللَّهِ فَعَلَيْهِ بِقِرَاءَةِ الْقُرْآنِ. Whoever wants to talk or to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, do your prayer. So that's when we connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, Sabrina, not just those who believe in God. When we have religion, we believe in God, so we find some ways to meditate. But those who don't believe in God, they believe in meditation as well, but they connect maybe not to God, but they connect to something else, like the nature, for example. Because human nature, we need something. There's something within us that is always feeling there's void in there, and we need to find something to fill up that void. And that's when we realize that, oh, I think I need some time to get in touch with my spirituality. Although that we do not believe in religion, but we still believe in spirituality. I have to be in touch with my spirituality. So in Islam, as Muslims, we have that, and it's called salat. It's called praying. So it takes a while, the process, it takes some processes. You need to, maybe you might want to join in classes where you can help you to understand how you can pay attention or put your mind into salat. Wallahu alam, yeah.
Yeah, no, I thank you for sharing. And I think the beauty about Islam and salat is that, Muslim people, I guess, in Islam, we're encouraged to do it 5 times a day. And that's a great way to kind of, engage in that meditation, to calm yourself down, to regulate your emotions.
Like stress also from your everyday's burden or your work is tiring, so you need just to pause, get in touch with your inner self, just you, your me time, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps, inshallah.
And I think a lot of, Muslims maybe in my generation, I don't know, but they might feel that, 5 times a day is a lot. It's an obligation. But it's actually a time for you to reconnect with yourself, reconnect with Allah, with your emotions as well. So I think definitely there are tons of benefits to meditation, to prayer, and there is definitely some grain of truth to just praying lah, right? And I think the other thing that's very important that you brought up is that it's also about having the intention, motivation, and also the discipline to do it, right? It takes energy and willpower to actually practice. And that's, I think, back to Afika's sharing, when you're feeling depressed and when you really have no motivation to do anything, when you're numb, that's going to be the last thing you're going to do. You don't want to get out of bed. It's hard. I think, thank you for sharing. And I would also love to hear from Afika, whether that resonated with you. How is Islam a part of your own self-care practice today? Oh, you got to mute, sorry. Unmute.
Okay, so for me, being a Muslim, right, there are some challenges for me to pray. For example, like there will be these whispers that says, "Don't to pray, I just kada kada aja, just kada, you know." And then I was like, maybe I should kada today or tomorrow. So I agree that willpower is required to actually even take the ablution and to go on a prayer mat. You have to be on teleko, you know, you have to pray outside, then you start your prayer. And then there'll be still whispers like think about this, think about that, don't think about Allah, you know. So for me, I have these experiences whereby I couldn't have khusyuk in my prayer. And it's quite tiring for me to try to fight it. But but for myself, I try to bring back my focus to Allah and remember the meaning of the surahs that I actually see out. Yeah, so that's what I would say.
Thank you for that. And it's funny that you said you're like, yeah, I have to put on my telekong and like bring the mat out, everything. It's but I think it's also there is some benefit to making that a part of your like mindfulness practice, right? This going through the whole routine also enables you to ground yourself and just do things step by step as you create that space to connect, right?
Yeah. Something, Sabrina, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah, you mentioned about praying, so it requires a push or willpower motivation. Yeah, just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, innaha lakabiratun. I have this one lady, she said that she went through depression, and she said that when she thought of praying, she wouldn't want to pray because it's like an obligatory, something that forced upon her, so she doesn't like it. But she said that I tried to pray, but I don't perceive it as praying. I perceive it as complaining to Allah. Because when she heard me saying that you talk to Allah, you connect to Allah, you say Allah is the most all hearing, whatever you tell your troubles, okay, you just say it out, because at times we need to just let it go to Allah. So she said that when she thought about praying as prayer itself, she wouldn't want to do it, but she would get motivated when she felt that I wanted to complain to Allah and let my heart out, you know, like that. So I think it's like, maybe we can change our perception as long as we do that prayer. Yeah, so it's a step-by-step thing. It's fine. Okay, it's not something that what do you call that? That you feel that you cannot be enforced. For example, you feel that I cannot. The more that I pray, the more the more I feel depressed. For example, just bear in mind that whatever that you're going through, okay, as long as you find that, oh, these steps can help you to find the light at the end of the tunnel, just go ahead with it.
I think so it sounds like it's really about finding our way there and kind of overcoming that, I guess, idea that it's an obligation. I don't know about you, but maybe Afika or anyone, but you know, growing up, you're like, oh yeah, this is something that you should do every day, you know, 5 times a day, plus you have to like all these things from your parents, right? But sometimes we don't get the benefits, we don't understand why, and we're just told to go and practice, go and pray. But I think, you know, when you look back, or once you've actually experienced the benefits of it, as Ustazah you've shared, and also Afika as well, then that's when you internalize that, okay, this can work, and this really does bring me closer to God, bring me closer to myself, and it does have everyday benefits as well for our own lives and our relationships. So I think just before, there's some questions that have come in, and we would love to get there. But before we get there, I'd love to hear from Dr. Syed Harun. I'd love to hear from you how you, on a personal level, have practiced Islam while you practice your medical profession. How does that work for you?
Yeah. Actually, I'll take the example that's been shared already. You also, so when we talk about prayer, and recently I did post on Instagram with regards to fasting in the context of mental health. Same can be said for prayer, in that, as you mentioned, there are facets of prayer that are akin to principles of mindfulness, right? But the other aspect that I tend to share with some of my patients is that also recognize that prayer can also be your safe space, a spiritual safe space. where in the context of, and I've seen this in some of the learned scholars as well, that when they're feeling stressed or when they're feeling challenged or when they're upset, the first thing they turn to as their the physical act is that they decide to pray sunat or 2 rakaat just to bring themselves back, right? And come back from that state of say being upset at that point of time. And in that sense, it's sort of like a spiritual safe space. We talk about safe space psychologically as a room or as a place where it gives you calm. But prayer in itself can also be a safe space for you. And Kaza also mentioned about being able to have a conversation with your maker, to be able to share with regards to your own struggles, and to be sincere in that act. And that's a beautiful thing. Perhaps the third thing that I've done before and I've shared with a patient of mine is that sometimes we think when we're depressed or when we're extremely anxious, it's impossible to pray. But I offered and I ventured to them that in that state where you are so depressed and so anxious, in that state of need and closeness, that is really when you are at your most sincere in your prayer. And relative to others who do not feel that way during the prayer, you are closer in that prayer and even more sincere than others, by a huge margin in that state. And that is when you need to pray, and that is when you will stand to benefit most from that prayer. And you're most sincere as part of the prayer. So yeah, if I may offer these three things: the mindfulness, prayer as a safe space, and in that state of despair through your mental illness, you are actually at your closest, even more than some of us can imagine.
No, thank you for sharing that. And I think what I'm getting is that, prayer, Islam, actually even any religion even, it can coexist with science, with the medical side of things, right? And I think we just have to recognize that there's a place for both and embrace both of it as and integrate that as part of how we approach our lives. It's not either or, it can be both.
And still take your medications as well.
Still yeah, if you're diagnosed, please continue your medication.
Medications, yeah.
I think that's going to be very important. Afika, as Dr. Harun was sharing, I saw you nodding. I'm curious to know what came up for you. What are your thoughts?
I was actually very surprised with his response to the patient that actually when we are in the most in need of Allah, right, when we pray, right, though there's a struggle, there's actually a very big margin of closeness to God than the rest of others. So I think that really opens my mind about things. But I think for now, actually for myself, I want to cry in my prayer, but it's so hard to cry after taking medication. But when I was sick, it was very easy to cry, like to just cry and cry and cry for 1 hour. So that's what I miss the most about crying.
And that's a question around medication. Okay, you're back. So I think we do have a few questions, and we will get to that question around understanding medication, practically how to seek help for your mental health. But I also have a couple of questions I want to get to before we get there. So one question that came up a couple of times is around how do we help our loved ones who is struggling from a mental perspective? So maybe we can kind of take it from a medical angle, and then maybe I'd love to hear from Ustazah as well. So how can we help our loved ones who are mentally struggling? Dr. Harun, would you like to share your thoughts?
I think as far as mental illness is concerned, the awareness in relation to mental illness has grown tremendously over the years, especially with COVID as well, where everyone has, there's been a palpable shift in terms of how people have felt stressed over the years, and people are a lot more forthcoming in terms of seeking help. So my first advice would be to family members: don't be worried about talking about the issue, and broaching the subject and possibility that people may need to see someone. As to the practical steps to be able to take, what you can do is that you can actually just go down to your friendly GP within your neighborhood. You can go to the polyclinic. They can do a simple screen just to get a sense of where you're at in terms of your mental health. And if there's a need for them to refer onwards, then they will do the necessary, or whether it be to refer you to a psychologist, or even to a psychiatrist at a specialist level. If you don't already know, actually, at the polyclinic, there are some polyclinics who also have sort of like allied health support in the form of psychologists. So before they even decide to refer to a psychiatrist, there's actually psychologist services at the polyclinics, in some of the polyclinics, where they can just refer, and then there's a discussion between the primary care practitioner with the psychologist to see where things can help. And it's really sort of like an awareness that we want to be able to take care of people in distress at the community level without having to escalate it to a specialist level. So there are many resources. If you're not sure, just see your GP.
Yeah, okay. So see your GP, go to the polyclinic. You don't have to go to IMH. It sounds scary, we know. Yeah, so this actually is a lot more accessible than we may think, right?
Absolutely. Maybe if I could just slip in a bit, Sabrina, if
Sure.
essentially if you do feel that it's after office hours, and it is an emergency, and you feel that this person really needs help right now, because say there are some triggers, some red flags at that point of time. You mentioned IMH. You can also walk into any restructured hospital emergency department, and they'll be able to see you at that point of time, and then subsequently have a plan for you in terms of the support that you need. So all the general hospitals are well equipped. They also have psychiatric departments as well. And Afika also mentioned about NUH. Yeah, so it's all available out there. You just need to find out and get appropriate help.
Great. So if it's an emergency, go to one of the A&Es at the hospital.
That's right.
Okay, I hope some of us can be more comfortable to go seek help. It's really like any other health issue. If you break your leg, you're not going to sit around at home and pray it away, right? So I think we can do this proactively for our own mental health. Okay, so actually there are quite a few questions I'll get to. So this question is for Ustazah Nadia. Is there any specific dua or prayer for us to read so that Allah will help make things easier for us?
There are many du'as, actually. There are many prayers for us to recite, but I will just share something that is easy for us to practice. Firstly, I would like to encourage everyone to try to do their obligatory as much as possible. Okay, you might want to push yourself to do so. Initially, it's like pushing yourself, but eventually it will become something that you will get used to it, because it really helps. Something that we cannot comprehend, in fact, how do Allah actually help us when it comes to prayer, because Allah is the maker of our heart. If our heart is not feeling calm, we have to trust Allah in this. He's the maker of our heart, and only Allah can calm our heart. That's the first thing. Try as much as you can to do the obligatory prayer. Okay, now apart from this, what other recitation? What you can do is from our scholars, from our teachers, they mention us, they inform us that never to leave 100 times of istighfar every single day. Istighfar is when you recite a dhikr, a remembrance of Allah, where you seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the recitation is like this: Astaghfirullah. That's all. Astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. So say that 100 times, because there's a hadith that mentioned, Prophet Muhammad SAW mentioned that by reciting istighfar, Allah will give ease to you. So this comes from the Prophet. So you want ease. Of course, there are always struggles, but we just hope that in the struggles, Allah will provide us ease. That's 100 istighfar, a very easy recitation, astaghfirullah. And our teachers kept on reminding us another, the most, we call it that it's an urgent zikir, urgent zikir, because you, especially at the end of times, you should recite this. It's the sending our blessings to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam 100 times. We call it salawat. It's very easy also. Allahumma, if the shortest form is Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. So I will recite it slowly so that you can listen through. Allahumma, that's the one. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. I repeat again. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. At least 100 times a day. So this is the advice given to us by our teachers, and it helps us. I'm not saying that, I'm not telling people that, you know what, Asatiza, we do not have any struggles, any problems. I have people coming to me asking, Ustazah, you never have problem, is it? It's not that we do not have problem. I'm telling you, our struggles are real too. Our struggles are real. I have experience. I was in during the time of the COVID time. Is the earliest stage. I was like, I had COVID. I was like number 200 something, nothing to be proud of. So I was isolated for a month in the hospital. I was oxygenated, so I was alone. So it took a toll on my mental health at that time. But fortunately, I have someone to talk to. So I have a friend who's a psychologist, and I mean, she learned psychology. And then at one point of time, I told her that I don't know whether there's something wrong with me. What happened? She asked. Well, I think I saw ants inside my room, and I was talking to the ants. Is that a problem? And she answered me like this. Oh, it's okay, Nadia. If you're talking to the ants, it's fine. As long as you don't tell me that the ants are responding to you. So that means the ants are replying to you. So if you're telling me that, oh, the ants are talking back to you, I think you need to get yourself further diagnosed, something like that. All right. So it's always a struggle, but we have ways to calm ourselves down, especially when our teachers taught us to recite this zikir or remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we practice that every single day. And I hope that this will help you as well. So do your obligatory prayer as much as you can, and recite istighfar, and recite blessings to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah help all of us. Ameen ya Rabbal Alamin.
Thank you so much, Ustazah Nadia. I think that was really helpful. And thank you for saying it slowly too. It helps everyone too. I think we're all taking notes here. I think it's just been really great to hear from a doctor, from someone's lived experience, from someone who's very familiar with Islam, obviously. So I think just a final question that I want to get to Afika before we wrap up, right? And that question is, in helping to convince the people around me that mental health is a real issue, that is something that I need to take care of, that I may need medical or professional treatment, how can I convince the people around me? Afika, what's your take on this? What would you say?
I feel that we cannot force them to seek treatment if they don't want to. I think the best way is to make dua to Allah to soften his heart. You know, soften someone's heart if they are quite resistant to the treatment. That what works for me lah. So whenever I want good for others, I will always make dua for them for every prayer. So it really helps me a lot. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, thank you. I think that's about recognizing that you can't control everything. You can only influence how they feel or how they accept the situation. So that's actually very wise words. Thank you for sharing that. So now that we've come to the end of the hour, I'd like to just thank everyone for being a part of this conversation. Thank you for joining in. I really am super grateful to Ustazah Nadia, to Afika, to Dr. Syed Harun for being here today, for sharing your experiences. And I think we've had a very balanced discussion around Islam and mental health. I hope that it's helped all of you tuning in to navigate your own journeys with mental health and Islam. And the last message I'd like to share is the next show that we will have as part of Hello Ramadan 2023 is going to be on Thursday, 6 p.m. And it is called Finding Allah in the Face of Adversity, which is a fireside chat between Melvin, the CEO of Have Halal Will Travel, and Fahmi, who is from Captain Roti. So that sounds like a great name, right? So thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and have a good rest of your day.